The debt ceiling debacle continues, this time with Senator Lindsey Graham threatening Republican senators who might help in increasing the debt ceiling and actually work along with Democrats to make that happen. Now, this is also in response to Mitch McConnell, the Senate Minority Leader, who has apparently struck some sort of deal with Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer so that Democrats will be able to pass this debt ceiling legislation or raise this debt ceiling. Now, Lindsey Graham is like, look, guys, we can't do it because our daddy Trump is gonna give us a spanking and we just can't have it. That's really what's going on right now. That's how pathetic Lindsey Graham and the rest of the Republican caucus is. So in blunt remarks to the Senate Republican Conference, Graham harshly criticized McConnell. He said McConnell had backed away from his vow earlier this year to not give Democrats any help in raising the debt limit. Now, let me just be clear. If they don't raise the debt limit, everything falls apart in the economy, okay? The markets crash immediately. The very markets that these Republican lawmakers are heavily invested in, they're gonna raise the debt ceiling. It's gonna happen. That's my prediction. Obviously, I don't know for sure, but you can quote me on it because it's gonna happen. It would be disastrous if they fail to raise the debt limit. Now, one GOP senator said Graham specifically warned colleagues that the president is going to be engaged on this issue. And when he says president, I think they're referring to Trump here. He told colleagues that McConnell had led them on a charge up a hill and now they were getting shot in the back, according to the senator.
Yeah, what's funny is that Trump is the one shooting them in the back, and Lindsey Graham is blaming Mitch McConnell, not Trump. He's like, why did you lead us up the hill? Because it exposes us to getting shot in the back by Trump. So since he's shooting us in the back, we should do whatever he says. Lindsey Graham is the definition of weakness. No one has ever been more spineless in American politics. He's a jellyfish. And so
I mean, I want Josh Hawley to address the lack of masculinity when it comes to Senator Lindsey Graham. I mean, they're constantly obsessed with masculinity, right?
Yeah.
What is this weakness, this lack of strength that they pretend to be so much in favor of? Donald Trump isn't even president, but he's got a firm grip like around their necks. It's so pathetic.
Yeah, it's funny from the Stand Your Ground party. He's like, oh, he's shooting us from the back. Run, don't fight back. Don't surrender to Trump. So look, this is an interesting civil war. At the end of the day, if the Republicans ever don't raise the debt ceiling, that means the donors have lost control of the Republican Party, and that's a fascinating phenomenon. But that means they've gone insane populist. I mean, obviously you see a giant faction already doing that, but what I'm telling you is things are not what they appear in, especially if you're watching mainstream media or reading them. So in my whole lifetime, this whole not raising the debt ceiling has always been a fraud. There's never any question about it because the donors control both the Republican and Democratic Party nearly 100%, and it would affect their stock portfolios. And they're not clowns, so they might be bad guys, but they're not clowns. And so if 99% of the world's economists say yes, it would definitely send the US economy and probably the global economy into an immediate meltdown. They're not interested in losing all their money.
Right.
So now, if the Republicans actually get to a point where Trump has beaten all the donors, but leads them off a cliff. Like, I love beating the donors, but not if you're driving off a cliff, right? But if they drive off a cliff, that means that's it. They will do anything, no matter how irrational.
Right.
And so
I got it.
At this point, I don't think the donors have lost full control.
No.
But Lindsey Graham, at the same time, is also an animal of the donors, right? And he's a kept boy, and so for him,
I know
within the caucus to say no, we should be full-blown idiots, defy the donors, and drive off the cliff. That's a troubling phenomenon.
This is my take on this whole debacle, this whole story, okay? So Trump releases a statement in response to Mitch McConnell striking some sort of deal with Chuck Schumer in order to raise the debt limit. And Trump's statement is this. He says, Mitch McConnell just folded on the debt ceiling. A total victory for the Democrats. Didn't use it to kill the $5 trillion real number. Build Back Worse bill. By the way, that bill it's going nowhere. What $5 trillion? What are you talking about? They passed a bipartisan infrastructure bill to the tune of $1.75 trillion, right?
No, yeah.
1.75 trillion for the bipartisan infrastructure bill. The Build Back Better agenda hasn't passed.
No, yes, it's definitely trillion. 1.75 is Build Back Better. So when he says a real number, it's not. Of course, it's not a real number.
Yes.
The other one, when you take out all the parts, the one that actually did pass, when you take out all the parts that were already old funding from COVID relief bills, it's only about 550 billion. So half a trillion that Trump is claiming is 5 trillion. So that's normal Trump lies.
Right, and he says Build Back Worse bill that will essentially change the fabric of our country forever.
Yeah.
They want to make you drink Starbucks every single day from now until forever. Anyway, all the hyperbole from Republicans is hilarious. But then he follows the statement with, the old crow is a disaster. Obviously speaking about Mitch McConnell. So my theory is Lindsey Graham is terrified of Trump. I think that he really does believe that Trump will probably be in power again sometime in the near future. And so he's doing his due diligence to make daddy happy, right? He's speaking out against McConnell, knowing full well that McConnell will be dismissive of Lindsey Graham. But it is having an effect because apparently Republican senators who are gonna go along with what McConnell is doing are now kind of backing off. Before I get to those statements, I do want to show you how McConnell is responding to this controversy.
For Washington Democrats, 2021 will have one major theme: ramming through inflationary spending on a partisan basis that hurts American families and actually helps China. The whole country understands that Democrats own this mess. They have seized one-party control of the economy, so you better believe that they'll have one-party accountability for the resulting nightmare. Democrats have wanted to transform the country alone. They want to print and borrow trillion after trillion on their own. They want to create even more inflation on their own. So as Republicans have made clear for months, they will have to own a debt ceiling increase as well. This week, the House and Senate have reached a bipartisan agreement to make that happen. Democrats will get one shot at this. They won't be able to add any other amendments, and every single Senate Democrat will have to put their name to the gigantic dollar amount of debt they're prepared to pile on the American people.
So this is Mitch McConnell's way of selling it to Republicans, because the argument here is, well, this is going to be disastrous for the Democratic Party. And he also, of course, notes that now there's a bipartisan path forward, but that bipartisan path might be in jeopardy now because of Donald Trump's threats. One lawmaker who spoke anonymously to The Hill said somebody needs to get to Donald Trump and tell him to shut up about this. Again, said one nervous Republican lawmaker, who added that Graham's warning about Trump is having a chilling effect. Graham was warning us about what Trump was going to do, and may God have mercy on your souls, the lawmaker said. They're so afraid of Trump, it's amazing. It's amazing.
God, we need a populist in this country so badly to look out for the average person and not the donors and big businesses. And instead, we got a populist madman who says, hey, why don't we just drive the country off a cliff and see what happens? And because he doesn't care about us. He wants the country to be in shambles when Biden is president so he could re-win the presidency.
He loves chaos.
Yeah, of course, it's so obvious. If you told Trump right now, hey, you could press a button that destroys the American economy, costs 20 million jobs, and all of the different disasters that happen, but you get back into power, he'd be like, where's the question? Of course I'll destroy America to get back in power. And so now his spineless lackeys like Graham are doing it. All right, but guys, this is important. The messaging, so Republicans say, okay, Democrats own all this debt, et cetera, et cetera. And the Democrats in return say nothing, as always. Just lay down flat and get steamrolled, right? Why isn't there fiery speech after fiery speech about, hey, Republicans, you're the ones who raised the debt ceiling when you gave $2 trillion to the wealthy under Trump. Why'd you raise the debt ceiling? Why'd you raise the debt ceiling? Mitch McConnell's a liar. He loves raising the debt ceiling. Lindsey Graham's a liar. No, nothing. Deaf, mute, and dumb for sure. So Democrats never fight back. Now to the media. Look, there's many articles, of course, I read about this, but one, half of them, and the one on the Hill in particular, said. So I'll focus on this one because I don't want to speak to all the articles, but most of the articles miss 75% of the relevant facts. Okay, so what are the relevant facts here? Number one, this is not about new spending. This is about paying for old spending. By the way, the majority of which was done under Donald Trump. But if you don't clarify that in your article, everybody thinks, oh, the Democrats are now spending trillions of dollars and that's why they're raising the debt ceiling. No, that's different. You want to criticize them for the bills, that's fine, right? That's a political issue. But the debt ceiling doesn't have anything to do with that. It's paying old bills. You have to clarify that in every article. If you don't, then you have completely misled your readers. Then they don't clarify at all in a great majority of the articles that the Republicans raise the debt ceiling every time there's a Republican president. Well, God, that gives you the context of they're massive hypocrites and they're playing with your lives and your jobs for their own political gain. If you don't write that, you haven't really given people the real story. And this article in particular didn't even mention that it would be an economic apocalypse if the Republicans do this. So it made it seem like a 50-50 issue. Oh, totally. Are the Republicans right or the Democrats right? Is it too much spending? And finally, of course, this one they'll never, ever, ever do because the corporate media is corrupt. But you should talk about what we just told you, which is the real people, the real dynamic here, and it's an interesting one, by the way, super interesting, is between the donors and Trump and the populist wing of the Republican Party. And both sides, in my opinion, are terrible people, right? But you don't have to say that as a reporter. But you do have to explain to the readers that Trump is going not against Mitch McConnell, but against most of the Republican donors. That's a more interesting story, and in some ways gives Trump more credit for being more populist and against donors who everybody hates, right? But they don't do any of that context. And so God help people who are getting their news from mainstream media, because they're honestly, it's just awful. You can't actually tell what's happening in the country at all if that's all you're reading.
Yeah, because a debt ceiling story, let's just keep it real. I mean, snooze fest. Like, who cares? Like, who sees a headline about the debt ceiling? It's like, whoa, I can't wait to read about that. But the debt ceiling, once you understand the impact of not raising it, how it would totally crash the economy, potentially the global economy. Yeah, it's an important issue. It's like they go out of their way to frame it in a way that like repels people.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah, look, I'll say one last thing about that. Look, if you don't raise the debt ceiling, one of the reasons the economy crashes is because then people no longer have full faith and credit in the United States dollar. And what that does is it greatly increases the interest rate that we are all charged as Americans, including most importantly, the US government, okay? So what that does is it actually massively adds to the deficit. It does not reduce the deficit. So it's deeply ironic and very fiscally irresponsible. I have seen that explained in about 2% of the articles. It's an absolute fact. You could read it online, you could find it. All of the economists agree that that's what it would do. But if you read a mainstream media article or you watch cable news, you would think Republicans are the ones that are being fiscally responsible and the Democrats are being fiscally irresponsible. When in reality, it's the exact opposite in this situation.